Hi everyone in cloud computing, and welcome to episode 19 of the Cloud Computing Australia show with Brad Nelson and the world's #1 cloud industry expert and thought leader David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialists placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. This week we're excited to have as our special guest Joe Kinsella. Joe is the CTO and founder of CloudHealth Technologies, which provides cloud computing services related to cost management, governance, automation, security and performance. CloudHealth Technologies is one of the fastest growing companies in Boston with over 270 plus employees, over 2,000 customers and $86.5 million in funding. The company has been named a 2018 vendor to watch by Information Week. Hi Dave and Joe, a warm welcome to you both. It's exciting to have you both on the Australia show this week.
Yeah, it's great to have Joe on. Joe's been on my podcast back when I was with Cloud Technology Partners. He's been a great guest. I mean, that's rags to riches, or basically riches to riches story in terms of him building his company up and becoming kind of, the de facto standard in how people are leveraging, cloud-based cost governance, things like that today. And so these guys are very innovative in the space, and looking forward to have Joe on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, David, and thanks for having me on the show, Brad.
You're very welcome, Joe. It's an absolute pleasure. So this week we're talking about something rather interesting, and it's all about cloud cost and management and how it's changed since 2014. The years have moved at such an accelerated rate, and we're reaching an inflection point at which we need to shift back towards the centre and find a balance between distributed management and centralised governance from IT. But I mean, really moving it into an Australian remit. What should Australian businesses who are moving to cloud do in order to deal with cloud computing management changes? Over to you guys. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, and this is kind of how I set it up for Joe, because he's obviously the subject matter expert in this thing. Ultimately, all of the businesses that are moving into cloud technology are moving into very complex multi-cloud arrangements. So they're leveraging hybrid clouds, they're leveraging lots of cloud services that they're trying to in essence, managed from a centralized platform. And they're struggling. So, what I predicted, 3 years ago is that we're going to hit a tipping point. And Australia is definitely, part of this. I'm seeing a lot of companies out of Australia that I'm talking to today in terms of hitting the tipping point and having so many services that they're trying to, in essence, govern and manage for the particular company, that they have to have this technology in order to make it happen. So Joe, what's your take on this? Are you guys seeing more and more of a demand for this internationally?
Without a doubt. And I think Australia is actually a different market from other regions around the globe. So one of the things we see in Australia is the public cloud was really embraced later in Australia, but it's sort of been embraced with a vengeance since its adoption. And so in many ways, the Australian market is actually ahead of some of the other markets, such as Europe and other areas of Southeast Asia. So, when you go to Sydney, you're more likely to find consumers of the public cloud that are using things like serverless and kind of platform services and more of the cutting edge elements that the cloud can bring to your strategy.
So going forward, are we, is this technology just going to be pervasive in terms of it's just kind of mandatory table stakes? If we're going to move into more than one cloud, in fact, I see this as important even if you're dealing with one public cloud, with the ability to, make these things work within the enterprises. And also another question, would this relate down to leveraging on-premises systems? So we're typically not doing a lot of cost management on the systems like that. We're doing very granular things. And so we can actually do showbacks and chargebacks on the mainframe systems, distributed computing systems, the oceans of LAMP stacks that we have within the data centers and the cloud technology today.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big shift over the last several years. So if you go back to 2014, there really was a focus on some very primitive needs. It was really around being able to understand costs from a business perspective. And the users in 2014 were often very sophisticated in their understanding of cloud costs. And on-premise wasn't something that they thought about, David. When you fast forward to 2018, that's completely transformed. You see a very broad spectrum of users, from beginners to advanced, that are leveraging the cloud. On-premise is an essential piece of most enterprise strategy today. And in the needs around cost management have moved from cost allocation to continuous cost optimization. So there's just been a complete transformation in how we think about managing cloud costs today.
So as we move forward, kind of like what's next for, cloud cost management? There's talk of machine learning based systems being integrated with this stuff. I've been talking to lots of people in the industry that are looking for this being the next move. And so we can kind of predict costs going forward, do detailed analytics, the ability to do predictive cost strategy, because we're getting to the point where my clients are getting cloud bills for $100,000 a month. And that's not chump change. It's a lot of money that really affects the bottom line. So is there ways in which they can look out or grow out the predictive analytics, how it's going to affect various systems, tie these things to DevOps as we roll out different applications and make sure that we're accounting for the cost, for the cost increases are going to be around particular workloads that are moving to the cloud? It just seems like so many moving parts. It's overly complex. We have to automate every step of this.
Completely agree, which is I think we moved from this model in which we provisioned what we needed, and it was all about innovation and agility, to a model in which increasingly we have to build into what we provision the continuous optimization of cost. So we've kind of made this shift where cost optimization is built in the box now as we start to provision different business services and different applications and workloads. But I think the ML component is definitely key. But I think there's a broader challenge going on, David, which is the cloud complexity continues to rise. And I think you kind of touched on this briefly. So if you look, in 2009, I was running one of the larger public cloud deployments in the world, and it spanned 4 public clouds at the time. A lot less impressive now than it was then, but it was 4,000 or 5,000 cores of compute, 4+ petabytes of storage, all in the public cloud. And if you go back and look from 2009 to now, every year, quarter, month, week, I have been in the public cloud. It has become more complex than the previous year, quarter, month, and week. And so I think that complexity is a broader trend we have to watch, which is it affects cost management, but it really affects every aspect of how we manage our business services, business outcomes in the cloud. But I think we're reaching a tipping point, David, where we're just on the cusp of a point at which people and tools can no longer manage our business services in the cloud. They're moving too fast, and we're going to have to move to a model in which we entrust smart software that's ML driven and understands more than just analytics, understands our strategy and the outcome we're trying to optimize for. So I think we're right at this cusp of transition.
So you guys are making great inroads into this sector right now, and I think it's going to be a huge growth area. You couldn't have picked something I think is better in terms of what the needs are going to be coming forward, just because it's kind of razor blades. In other words, people are buying Amazon, people are buying Azure, people are buying Google. They're going to need some way to, in essence, govern these systems from a cost perspective going forward. So what would you think, or what was your 3 things that Australian companies should be looking for right now in terms of cost management, in terms of retooling their existing infrastructure as they are moving to complex cloud environments?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is it really starts with a understanding of your strategy. I think it follows with understanding how you're going to apply people and processes to it, and then it follows with technology. So if I start with strategy, I think back in 2014, we all thought that the cloud was going to be cheaper than, in all cases, than on-premise infrastructure, and that's really not the case today, which is we realize there's certain cases where the public cloud is optimized and is substantially cheaper than on-premise, and then there's cases where it's not. So understanding your strategy of what you're going to provision, what across your portfolio you're going to leverage to support your business outcomes is, I think, an essential component of cost management. Next, on the people and process side, just being able to realize that cost optimization is continuous. It never stops. In fact, it's trending downward in terms of the frequency that you have to manage it at. Back in 2014, it was something that maybe you had to manage down to the day, in some cases a week. In 2018, it's continuous. It's down to sub-minute and sub-second where you want to optimize for cost. And then I think finally just aligning people and process. I think there's once you align the roles that manage cost and manage governance with your organization with a clear process of how you're going to manage it, and it's in what is typically a very distributed adoption approach to the cloud, I think then you can actually fully optimize.
Yeah, and so going forward, you guys are going to basically focus on the ability to kind of bring in metrics, and not only from detailed metrics in terms of who's using what for usage-based things, processes, users, things like that, but actually get into the ability to kind of report the value that's coming back from the use of cloud. That seems to be a core thing that my customers are missing. There's lots of tools out there to do it, but it's very difficult to point to one that's able to provide one report in terms of like, well, this is our usage for the last year, and this is how much money we saved over traditional approaches, cloud versus on-premise.
Yeah. I think that is a very common trend, which is I think at the front end, customers now want quick point-in-time assessment of what different options are across multiple different clouds and comparing it against the data center. But I think that kind of evolves towards what you mentioned, which is there's also an increasing desire to have continuous understanding of kind of called a health check of understanding what have I saved in going to the cloud, what is my true ROI. And I think that's something that we've been building in from early on in the company. And it's something that our customers keep pushing us more and more to just have that continuous reporting of what their trade-offs they've made, how they're, what the outcomes they're driving, and how they're saving money from those outcomes.
So where do you see the biggest growth in your business going forward in terms of the sectors, geographical locales? Australia being, I guess, the focus, and also, what kinds of use cases are you really being applied to typically?
Sure. So I think we see from a global perspective, we see a lot of growth in Southeast Asia, tremendous growth in Europe, and we see a lot of growth around the Middle East as well. So I think there's been strong international growth. I think if you look at a growth rate across our business, you'll see that the international growth is far outpacing the Americas growth. And I say one exception was just South America has some really substantial growth and seems to have been gaining steam over the last several years. I think the use cases vary across those different markets. The way I usually describe it to people is our product was built to support customers for all phases of their cloud maturity. When customers come to us and they're on the left side of the cloud maturity, they're kind of at the beginning stage of really harnessing the power of the cloud. They tend to want to talk about when they're on the right side and they're at the most advanced stage, the upper 3 or 4 or 5%, they want to talk to us about automating business outcomes in the cloud. And when they're kind of somewhere in the middle, it's about governance and standardization and optimization. That usually is how they want to engage with us. So I think the platform from the beginning was built to support the full range of maturity that customers go through as they adopt the cloud. It really depends on the specific customer and the specific region.
Got it. So from a perspective of a recruiter, Brad, are you guys seeing more interest in people who are looking for cloud governance and cost management, or is that just kind of something that's part of being an architect, part of being a solutions engineer, things like that? Are we actually breaking that out yet in terms of jobs?
From my point of view, I think the conversations have already been had on how they're going to govern their usage and why they're using certain products. So I haven't had too much dealings with that aspect of it. It seems to be at a C-level point of view, and I think that's our next show we'll be talking about, so it'll be interesting what goes on in that show. But it's something that is more often than not discussed at that level of, well, why are we going to use it, what are our expectations, and how can we monitor that in a more of a real-time environment.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of the whole thing. We have to kind of build skill sets around doing this well, and I don't think there are too many out there. I mean, there's great tools like the one Joe has developed and is selling, and I think that's going to be a great success. But I guess I would like to get your opinion on this, Joe. Do we need to retool our skill sets for leveraging cost governance, or is this something we can automate so there's not too many talent that has to be applied to it, but this seems like such an important thing that we really need to get some professionals around it to make it work correctly. Or am I off?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think for me, it starts with, if you look how the cloud is typically adopted in an enterprise, is it gets adopted in a very decentralized way. And when we enable a customer who's an enterprise customer, it's not uncommon to see 500 Amazon accounts and 50 Google projects, and and just that the reason why they have that number is just based on how they adopted it. At different points in time, someone put down a credit card and adopted the public cloud. And so I think that sprawl that's created by nature of the distributed nature of the adoption needs to be reined in, and I think it requires a very specific skill set, which is what we're trying to do is evolve a model, set of technologies, and a process that allows us to maintain all the reasons we went to the cloud. So all the agility and innovation that brought us into the cloud in the first place, but to do it in a way where we're not putting our multi-billion-dollar brands at risk. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of companies are dealing with today. And when I talk about this publicly, I usually equate it back to DevOps, which is, if you remember, in the early evolution of DevOps, there was the impedance mismatch between ops and engineering. And we needed kind of a model. We needed a mental model that allowed us to understand how we were going to drive a solution to that impedance mismatch. To me, governance is exactly the same thing. Just like there was infrastructure as code, there's going to be governance as code, and there's going to be a set of roles and processes that evolve from that.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think it's probably one of the most important things, even next to security, that we have to get going. And it's something that I think that, people have come to understand. So I wrote a book back in 2009. I had 2 chapters on governance, and I was taking grief from the editors in terms of why it was there. API level governance, as well as cost governance and policy-based governance, compliance governance, things like that. Because I don't think we can move to the cloud without putting these guardrails up. And especially around costs. I think we're going to see, some situations where some people are getting some bills they didn't expect because they don't have the cost governance and the cost control and the cost management goes along with this kind of on-demand thing. These services aren't free, and they can run afoul of the budgets that are out there. So this is exactly what we need to be looking at right now in terms of a science, in terms of a skill set, in terms of sets of technology like you're building going forward. Any last words?
No, makes sense. I think you'll see across enterprise, like if you look at Capital One as an example, you'll see examples of open source where enterprises are pioneering open source as a means to go manage this complexity that we're dealing with around governance. So I think keep an eye on that. I think it's an interesting evolution to see enterprises innovate solutions in this space.
Absolutely. Well, back to you, Bradley.
Thank you, David. I haven't been called Bradley for a while. Usually I get called Bradley if I've been a naughty boy, but I've tried to keep out of the conversation as much as possible this week with the recruitment side of things. So look, guys, it's been wonderful having you both on the show. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, David.
Well, at least you didn't call me Bradley. That's good. Well, Dave, thanks as well for being on the show. Look, I hope everyone's enjoyed watching the show this week. It's been pretty awesome. We've got some more shows lined up as well with Joe, which is going to be fantastic. You can get Joe on Twitter, which is at Joe Kinsella, and also the company, which is at CloudTech Health, or should I say at CloudHealth Tech. I'll get that round the right way. I'm also on Twitter, which is at Nelson_Hilliard. And thanks again for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share these videos. Thanks for watching.